Let's speak with Rod McKenzie, Managing Director of the Road Haulage Association. Afternoon to you, Rod. It's kind of deja vu for us, isn't it, this? I don't know how many times we have to have this conversation about not being ready, and it's not the fault of the industry.
Well, that's right, Ian. It is. I'm afraid it's not for lack of telling the government what the problem is and what they need to do about it. But we're heading for a situation, as you've just been reporting, that is somewhere in a range between shambolic and catastrophic.
Wow. So that's as good as you can define the current situation. Just give us in kind of Fisher-Price terms then, Rod. What is the problem? What's gone wrong?
Okay, so the problem is, obviously, there is going to be lots of red tape from the 1st of January for British exporters who want to sell their goods in Europe and beyond. And that paperwork is extremely onerous. And it's the sort of thing that you would need a customs agent to hire, to sort out for you. And there are not enough customs agents. We need about 50,000. We've probably got about 8,000 in this country. So that's the first problem. It's a highly skilled, highly trained job. Second problem, even bigger, is the IT. The government has a number of new IT systems which they haven't shared with the wider industry. They've shared with one or two people, but nowhere near the number of people who need to see it. So we don't know it works, we don't trust it. And we don't know whether it talks to other bits of IT, like the French, etc., for which this would be required. And the third thing, and probably the worst thing, is that the government has failed to tell us how to do the things that we need to do. In other words, they don't have a simple, easy to follow A to Z of how you get across the border legally. And in other words, they're telling us what to do, but not how to do it.
Now, an outsider might say, come on, Rod, you've had since 2016 or at worst 2018, 19 to get this in order. The industry must have known there were hurdles. Why is it that you've not been able to surmount them?
Well, that question needs to be properly addressed to the government, because it's 4 years during which it wasn't up to us to invent the IT. That was the government's job. It wasn't up to us to hire the customs agents to make all these things work. That was the government's job. It wasn't up to us to make sure that there were border-ready posts and security and all the rest of it. That was the government's job. These are all things they have spectacularly failed to do for 4 years, and they've left it to the last 4 weeks to have a kind of mass blind panic during which they blame shift and say, if it all goes horribly wrong, it's not our fault, it's that lot over there, it's the traders, it's the businesses. It's a disgraceful way to treat people, by implication, who are struggling their way through COVID, have been pointing this out to the government for literally years, and are now, left hung out to dry.
And in terms of, we are, as you said, 30 days away from when new legislation kicks in. What are those optics likely to look like on the 1st of January, Rod? Obviously, from a layman's perspective, I live in Kent, I grew up in Ashford, I'm aware of what the M20 can look like, the knock-on effects to the M2, all those arterial roads and routes around it as well, not to mention the industries across the country that are therefore affected by the knock-on effects. That's kind of what I'm seeing. Is that the potential scenario of everything not being in place by the end of the year?
Yes, well, obviously I don't have a crystal ball. It's difficult to know exactly what will happen. The government has been trying to avoid drone television news photographs of footage of lorries packed all over Kent in a gigantic nightmare lorry park, and they'll probably get their way on that, because if traders haven't got the right paperwork, they probably won't leave the depot. If they do leave the depot, they won't get the Kent Access permit if they haven't got the right paperwork, so they'll end up in some godforsaken lorry park somewhere, probably in the north of England. So in that way, the government's diffused the story. The other thing that is helpful to the government is that January trade doesn't really pick up till mid-January.
Okay.
First couple of weeks of Jan are quite quiet because it's after the Christmas rush, etc., etc. So this is a classic bit of news management, I think. They're trying to make it look as though, nothing to see here. But actually, somewhere else in the country, there will be a lot of traders, I suspect, a lot of businesses that find they can't move the stuff they want to abroad. They can't sell the stuff they want to abroad. And of course, the other part of the government's plan is by allowing imports in without checking them, it does mean that we will get a lot of stuff coming in.